Oni pressing sponsorizohet nga HIB.
So, Mr. Ischinger, thank you so much for accepting our request for interview. Recently, we are witnessing a lot of diplomatic activities. Emissaries are coming to Pristina and Belgrade, and also we have intervention through phone calls. An acute issue is the topic of license plates, but there is also work on a big agreement. Are you surprised by these efforts, seeing such a serious in a dialogue after a lot of delays?
Well, first of all, let me say that it is, of course, very good, and I welcome the fact that there is heightened activity in order to try to resolve the outstanding issues standing between Kosovo and Serbia and issues for the entire region. I want to say that it was a very important achievement a few days ago when the foreign minister of all 6 nations met in Berlin, and the draft agreement which they reached on mobility issues is, in my view, a very important step. And I hope very much that on the 3rd of November, this is only a few days away, when the heads of state and government of the West Balkan states meet in Berlin, that this agreement will be confirmed and ratified and actually put into practice. It's one thing for this to be on paper. The other question is it going to be implemented? And I hope very much that it will be implemented. It will be good for the citizens of Kosovo. It will be good for the entire region. And this could be an important step for further diplomatic activities.
Do you think that the situation in Ukraine and Russian aggression has imposed this dynamic in dialogue?
It has at least an indirect effect on the region. This indirect effect, as far as we are concerned in the European Union, is that we have to recognize that the security in southeastern Europe, the security in your part of Europe, is not yet sufficiently stable. There are still unresolved issues of recognition, unresolved territorial issues, and this is why we have reason to be worried that Russian influence, Russian disinformation could be exploited even more in the future as we try to deal with the aggressive war conducted by Russia in and against Ukraine. So yes, indirectly, the unresolved security situation in this part of Europe is a matter of grave concern, and this is one reason why there is now heightened interest in Brussels, in Berlin, in Paris, and elsewhere, and this is actually good for the region.
Is it clear to you, as a diplomat with a great experience in the Kosovo-Serbia conflict, what the West is trying to achieve right now?
Well, what we need to achieve is actually quite clear, and it has been quite clear for the entire period since Kosovo achieved independence in 2008. We need a comprehensive settlement of the outstanding dispute between Serbia and Kosovo. Hopefully, at some point, this will lead to mutual recognition. But at this moment, I think any interim step would also be a useful step in the right direction. We need full stability in this part of the world. I think it is also important for us to think about what role NATO could play. One thing is, what role can the EU play? The other issue is, what role can NATO play? We have recently seen that NATO has extended invitations to Sweden and Finland to join the North Atlantic Alliance. Now, Kosovo is one of these European countries that have not yet been able to make significant steps in the direction of eventual NATO membership. I think this should be on our agenda.
Seeing the current situation, has Kosovo made a mistake for not using Trump administration for achieving a final agreement, including land swap or border correction?
I am not sure whether the land swap idea, as presented a few years ago during the Trump era, would have actually resolved all the issues. Changes of borders are a very delicate issue, and they will work only in the direction of peace and permanent stability if everybody agrees with them. Everybody. Not only the two leaders, the population, the affected population in the areas where you talk about a swap. So these are delicate issues. And I'm skeptical whether the arrangements which were discussed during the Trump era would have actually led to permanent peace and stability. I'm not so sure. So I remain skeptical, and I think we need to find a different way forward, a different one than the one the Trump presidency proposed.
Seeing the current commitment of Washington and Brussels, including France and Germany, do you expect a final agreement before the elections in US and EU?
Well, I certainly hope so. Yes, I certainly hope so. I think there is now a sense of urgency. It is not okay that for the last 14 years, we have actually made some tiny, small steps, but we have not been able to deal with the larger issue of regional stability. This is not only about Kosovo. This is about the entire region. And there are a number of other unresolved issues when I think of, Bulgaria and North Macedonia, etc. So it is very good, it is very important that Brussels, my own country, Berlin, and others refocus their attention on the Western Balkans. I've always said in the past, if we cannot help to create permanent stability and prosperity in this part of Europe, we would fail our own fundamental mission of creating peace and stability in Europe, because this is part of Europe.
You were part of additional negotiations in 2007 as part of Troika, when Ahtisaari ended his efforts. What do you recall from that period?
Well, first of all, let me say, I think it's important to remember that the Ahtisaari effort was conducted over a period of years with full participation and involvement of the Russian Federation. It was not a Western effort, it was a comprehensive effort. It failed to be accepted in New York in the Security Council because of Russian objections, which is regrettable, because they were involved all the time in the Ahtisaari negotiations. And then, as a last effort, the Troika period was created. And Russia, again, was a full member of the Troika. And I have to say that in these 6 months of the Troika effort, the Russian delegate, Ambassador Botsan-Karchenko, was actually a good team member for myself and for Ambassador Frank Wisner of the United States. But when we came up with a possible way out of the difficulties that existed at the time and which continue to exist, it was again Russia that refused to lead the way. Russia accepted the no that was expressed by Belgrade against all compromise proposals that we had put on the table, including the so-called German-German agreement. So I think that Russia, I'm sorry to say, Russia bears huge responsibility for the fact that we have not been able, with Russia, together with Russia, to resolve this issue. And I think now we need to try to find new ways to move forward, even if it is being undertaken without Russia, because Russia is likely to block any additional attempt if we present it in New York.
Do you think it's valid even today, the model of two Germanys?
Well, you know, this was like 14 years ago. So obviously today is different than 14 years ago. But some of the fundamental principles that were behind the German model are still relevant today. The idea that if you cannot resolve at this moment the status issue, the formal recognition issue, let's at least try to resolve all the other practical issues. How can people travel across the border? Are your professional degrees being recognized? Are the license splits being recognized? What about business transactions, et cetera, et cetera? That worked in the German context in 1972, 73, and there is no reason to think that it could not also work in the context of Serbian-Kosovar relations. But of course, the draft agreement, which we submitted in 2007, would need to be adapted to the situation of 2022 in some way or another. And of course, there is now a renewed attempt by my government together with France to start moving things forward. And I think it's very interesting and important to recognize that France is actively participating in this effort. I am not aware that in earlier years and decades, France was so directly and proactively involved. So this is good.
Do you think that the model of two Germanys can work knowing the history and past in relations between Kosovo and Serbia?
Well, I think some of the principles can work. One of the principles of this German model is the principle of reciprocity. Each side has a responsibility, but the other side also has a responsibility. So, you know, a balanced outcome. That is a very old recipe for diplomatic negotiations. And the German model is a great model for the application of this principle of reciprocity. I have seen that Prime Minister Kurti has often spoken about reciprocity, so I understand that he appreciates this as a fundamental principle for the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo, and I would agree with him.
But this model does not require the mutual recognition. Do you think it's a problematic issue?
Well, I think, of course, the vision and the desire of Kosovo needs to be full recognition by the 5 non-recognizers in the EU, and certainly by Serbia. That's got to be the goal. But the question is, can the goal be achieved if interim steps are undertaken at a moment when we cannot yet achieve the final goal? As a practicing diplomat, I would tell you, if I know that I cannot now achieve my full list of desirables, let's at least take an important step in this direction and use the dynamic to take the next step. So I would always advocate in favor of a step-by-step approach, but I also understand the impatience of many of my friends here in Kosovo because they've been waiting now for 14 years.
What can EU do more for two countries, Kosovo and Serbia? Can the doors be opened faster in order to push two countries to achieve an agreement?
Well, I mean, one thing which I find extremely unsatisfactory is the lack of implementation by the European Union of visa liberalization for Kosovars. Quite frankly, this is a shame. We've promised this to our friends in Kosovo for a long time. and we're still not capable of fully implementing it. I understand that there are also a couple of outstanding issues on the Kosovo side, some legal issues, which I hope can be resolved so that the freedom of travel for Kosovars, like for other citizens in the region throughout Europe, can finally be implemented. I think this is something which we really owe to our friends in Kosovo, and it should happen now, not next year, not the year after. It should happen right now, in my view.
Should Kosovo accept an agreement that does not include mutual recognition?
Well, again, let me say, I fully accept and support the desire and the necessity for Kosovo to be recognized, to be fully recognized. But I would also support interim steps if they are designed to open the road to full recognition. So if we think of interim steps, they should not lead to blocking the road to full recognition, but they should open the road to full recognition. I would advocate in favor of interim steps if at this time full mutual recognition cannot be fully implemented, fully achieved.
But knowing Vučić and his ties with Moscow and Putin, do you think that this issue can be problematic for Kosovo? As many analysts say that if you do not agree for everything with Serbia, you do not agree for nothing.
Look, in international diplomacy, it's always important to think of the timing of your proposals and with whom and to whom you make your proposals. I think we are at the moment in a very critical period in European security. And I would not be surprised if, as a consequence of the current war in Ukraine, the relationship between Serbia and Russia will change. Maybe it will become closer. But it's also possible that it will not become closer. It is quite possible for me to imagine that many Serbs will think, we don't want to be associated so closely to a country which commits genocidal activities. Serbs remember, I hope they remember, that they committed genocidal activities here in Kosovo. So I hope they resist the temptation to be seen as partners of a country that is waging a brutal and illegitimate war of aggression. So let's see how this war plays out. And I would not be surprised if it would have long-term implications for the relationship between Serbia and Russia. I do not ignore the fact that there are also cultural ties, that there are religious ties, that the Orthodox Church, etc. But it's one thing to have cultural and religious ties, it's another thing to be partners in a war of aggression.
Let's move in another topic. It's about the Serbian Association municipalities. Kosovo is not still implementing that, and we are not seeing any proposal from Mr. Kurti or President Osmani about this issue. Do you think at some point things could be imposed?
Well, I think that this issue needs to be resolved. I think this is one of the part of the difficult legacy. I will repeat, I'm not so much in favor, because I've always been skeptical about land swapping ideas. But the idea of of somehow creating a special regime for the municipalities in the north strikes me as important. I also understand the difficulties and the risks involved, but I think it is important that this issue be tackled and not be not be, put on the back burner. It needs to be resolved because it is a source. It has been and it will continue to be a source of potential unrest and social difficulties for the people of Kosovo, and you need to get rid of that.
If there will not be an indictment from the special court for President Thaçi, do you think that today, if he was free, the issue of the final argument will be a done deal?
I don't, I wish I had the ability to have a crystal ball and see the future. I don't see the future, I cannot make an intelligent comment about what would happen if. I've learned in my diplomatic career not ever to respond to hypothetical questions, and I will not respond to a hypothetical question today.
Which continues to not impose sanctions on Russia. Do you think that the West is being soft with Serbia?
Look, it is of course desirable for sanctions to be even more widely respected and implemented. I think it is a mistake for Serbia not to join Western sanctions. At the same time, let's be realistic. Serbia has a lot of business ties, even military ties, social ties, political ties to Moscow. So I understand that this is not an easy decision for them. I think it's a mistake. And I think if Serbia really wants to join the European Union, this particular decision, if it stands, will turn out to be a setback for Serbia in their own quest to be recognized as a full-fledged candidate for membership in the European Union. It's a wrong decision by Serbia, and it should be changed.
One last question. Could Vučić sign a final agreement with Kosovo that include mutual recognition, and can the association be a counterweight for mutual recognition?
Well, I would certainly hope that President Vučić is capable of agreeing a mutual recognition package with Kosovo, with or without, the community's issues. It would be desirable to have a full package that involves not only the formal question of mutual recognition, but that resolves the outstanding questions affecting the North, affecting maybe religious issues, legal issues. I am aware that for many years, Kosovo has had a problem with the unresolved question of missing persons. That would also be on my list of, things that would need to be resolved in the context of a final comprehensive package. It's a big deal, but it could be, if there is enough political will on both sides, it can be done, it could be done, and it should be done.
Mr. Ischinger, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.